Hey, and we're live with another episode, and it's been a couple weeks. It feels like it's been a couple weeks. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe it's just me of the MMA Vivisection. We're in sort of like this UFC dead space and it's just an MMA dead space where it just feels like big cards are rare, few and far between. We haven't had that much to talk about. But we are back here talking World Series of Fighting 30. That is the biggest card going on this week. And I am joined by Eddie Mercado and Victor Rodriguez, as always. Men, gentlemen, people, thank you for joining me.
It is good to be here. Thanks for having me. I feel like it's been forever. I've been forced to watch bums fight until. No, it's been a minute. It's been a while. I missed you guys, man. I missed
Oh,
you
Uh,
feel
I,
that.
it's this is where we extend the internet hug because hey, Eddie, yeah, I'll say it right here, you're a great guy to work with. So this is all, it's fun. It's fun to do, but I mean, it's you kind of have to. I guess anyone who's been waiting for a World Series of Fighting Vivisection would be once they look at what kind of product they've been churning out lately, they could probably excuse us for going, yeah, you know what, they probably didn't need to go in on that. This is finally an event that feels more like a World Series event because you have fighters that are more recognized for fight, and not just some random dudes that just get scraped up from the regional scene with maybe one or two names at the top. So back to somewhat normal, I guess. Maybe I don't know. I don't know whether I should be happy about that, but it's certainly a bit of a relief.
Oh yeah,
guys.
it's a solid card put together, top to bottom. It looks more like a card where things are being built. They've got something going, something in the works, a process going on, good young fighters, talent from around the world, and solidly booked fights all the way through. It's definitely a step up from the three World Series of Fighting fights, and then whatever regional promotion they've hooked up with this week to fill out the rest of the card.
Or in some cases, just one World Series of
Yeah.
fighting fight, and then just what it seems like. But hey, that's just speculation.
Yeah, the last card actually had amateur fights on it, which I was kind of surprised to see.
Oh, we'll see. There you go.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
This doesn't have that. We're not going to be talking about every fight on this card. It's not, there's still some stuff on here that if you're really that interested in it, you can go do that research on your own. There are only odds out for the main card. But we'll be talking about the featured prelim and the rest of the main card above it. Got Clifford Starks versus Dave Branch in the main event, fighting for the middleweight title. Co-main, John Fitch and Joao Zeferino fighting for the welterweight title in what was supposed to be Jake Shields versus John Fitch for the grindiest grinder welterweight title of all time. But Shields apparently is none too happy with his contract with World Series of Fighting right now, and he has nixed that whole idea.
Mm. Yeah, and that's a shame because now you got after the controversy with Shields versus Magalhaes and everything that resulted from that, which we're probably going to address too at some point. After that whole thing went down, you had this sort of trifecta of like their biggest welterweights, which were Fitch, Shields, and Magalhaes, and now those are the biggest two names that you've got. Probably the most technical veterans that they have on the roster, and something that would be happen in the UFC, but now even that can't get done because of all these accusations and things going back and forth. So I mean that's it's just another series of problems and them not being able to get this together.
What do you think, Eddie? Would Fitch versus Shields have been your everything?
I mean, I'm a Jake Shields fan. I mean, John Fitch, I can't say that I enjoy watching him fight, but I enjoy watching Jake Shields fight. When he fought Damian Maia, yes, it was a grappling match, but it was exciting and I enjoyed it.
I love that like as a Jake Shields fan, you can't put up with John Fitch. You're like, no, that is a world too far for me.
I just think they're different animals. Like, they're just different animals. Like, they're just technically different approaches.
You know what? I absolutely agree with Eddie. They really are very, very different fighters. Although I do actually enjoy watching Fitch. So I like watching both of them. Like, and maybe that's just I don't know. Maybe it's a training thing. Like, I guess if you've done some grappling at some point, maybe you have a bit more of an appreciation for some of the nuance there. You know, it's probably not the. Would it be the same as watching Maya versus Shields? No, but I mean, I don't know. It's hard to talk about because it's theoretical, but man, it is an interesting thing just from a skill versus skill standpoint, and for just seeing how they perform throughout their careers. So it is a shame if this doesn't happen. I really hope it does and it happens soon.
I don't think Fitch is on that level. With all due respect, I don't think he's on Shields' level. Shields is leaps and bounds ahead of Fitch, I think, in the grappling department.
Well, I don't know about leaps and bounds. Certainly ahead in some respects.
It's too bad that we didn't get like the prime when Fitch was just the #2 welterweight, and then Jake Shields fighting him at that point, because there was that long stretch where Fitch was just like, it was GSP, and then John Fitch was that guy that the UFC didn't want to give a title shot to at all costs, and while he went out and beat every other notable welterweight they had.
Yeah,
So,
if it had been closer, if this had been happening closer to when Shields had gotten into the UFC, like say after the Catman fight or something like that, like that maybe, because Fitch was still in that nebulous #2 territory. Yep. So.
Yeah. All right. On that note, let's jump into the top of the prelims here, and a guy that I've been very happy to follow, Abubakar Nurmagomedov. He's taking on Matthew Frinku, Aussie, and what are your thoughts on this fight, Vic?
Well, interesting bout, and I actually like this matchup for a couple of reasons. And first off is the fact that Matthew Frinku, despite his 7-1 record, has a bit of a more established Muay Thai base. The way that he fights is actually it's somewhat measured, but he's got really good technique with his stand-up, especially defense is pretty decent. Now, he has been fighting largely on the Australian circuit. He moved to the U.S., and I believe he's still training out of Arizona. And since he's been in World Series of Fighting, he had that first fight against Eric Reagan, which should not have happened. And Eric Reagan was, in fact, I don't know if you guys remember him. He was that guy who at that time was like 15-24 or something like that. He came in a little chubby, and the commission implored him, begged him to retire, or if not, they were going to force him to. The only notable opponent here that we can look at is Danny Davis Jr. Now, an interesting fact, both Nurmagomedov and Frinku, both of their last fights were wins against Danny Davis Jr. as well. So Frinku is a little more, he's somewhat battle tested. He's been fighting guys that have had some respectable records, whereas Nurmagomedov mostly fought guys that didn't really have great records, but it didn't seem to really faze him when he came over to the U.S. He had his first fight World Series against Jorge Moreno, and then his second fight against Danny Davis Jr. It looks like they're throwing him not necessarily into the deep end, but now they're really giving him a far more quality opponent with a decent record and some okay wins. So it's going to be interesting to see how they both perform here, particularly Nurmagomedov, to see how well-rounded he is and how he's going to deal with a guy who's got much more of a striking edge, or more, I should say, more of a leaning more towards a striking game set. Yeah, I don't. Off the top of my head, I'm going to say Nurmagomedov because of more avenues to win. His ability to grapple is somewhat clever. He's not just one of those guys who's going to go straight to your legs, front to just back to front. No, he's going to probably look for angles. He's going to cut the corner. He's going to try to, run the pipe and take the guy down and work from there. I don't know if he's going to be able to finish Frinku, but I certainly would favor him to win.
All right, Eddie, your thoughts? Picking the upset?
I don't know. I'm real excited for this one. It's a classic striker versus grappler kind of match. You got Matthew Frinku, who is training out of Arizona Combat Sports, which is a pretty decent squad. He's got really solid fundamental kickboxing. He's a southpaw with a laser left hand. I mean, his left straight is beautiful, and he'll lead with it. Almost kind of how Floyd Mayweather does. Not on that level, but how Floyd he's one of those guys who will always lead with his rear hand, and people just don't see it coming. And he's real good at that. Although I feel like he kind of gets a little too one-trick pony with it sometimes, and not set it up where I think it would be a lot more effective of a strike. But he also has really nice kicks to go with it. And something I saw in his fight against Danny Davis Jr. is he kept dropping his hands, and I don't know if that's like a supreme confidence thing, or was he legitimately exhausted from the pace of that fight? So I'm not sure. That's kind of an unknown. But either way, it's not a good look. You can't do that. And I don't really know much about his grappling. I mean, he kind of just stood there and traded with everyone he's been in front of in the World Series of Fighting. So I'm not sure what his grappling game is like. So that's a huge question mark, especially against such a talented grappler as Nurmagomedov. So on the other side of that, you got Abubakar Nurmagomedov, who is the adopted brother of Khabib Nurmagomedov.
He's a cousin that was raised as a brother.
Cousin raised as a brother. Same Dagestani Sambo style. I mean, super aggressive, super technical wrestling. Amazing top pressure. But his striking is his kryptonite. He has this kind of weird. It starts out looking decent, but the further the fight goes along, the more his technique kind of goes out the window. And I get the feeling that since he's not hyper athletic, that maybe he needs to either pick up a serious strength and conditioning program or maybe drop down to lightweight, because I feel like he's getting out athleted, if that's even a term, in his past two fights. Even though he won those fights, I feel like if he was the better athlete, he would have not only won more impressively, but probably finished those guys. So I'm going to go on a limb, and I'm going to pick Frinku here because I think Abubakar needs to drop down or pack on some muscle.
All right. So, well, there's no odds, but you're going with what I would guess is the upset. If odds come out, I would expect Abubakar to be favorited.
I think Frinku is too good of a striker with too good footwork.
All right, good to know. And that brings us to the main card. It's the only prelim we're covering here. If you want info on the rest of the prelims, then you're digging too deep. Get something better to do with your day.
Get a girlfriend.
That's right. Or boyfriend, whatever.
Or boyfriend. Hey, it's the 90s.
It's not the 90s. All right.
The 90s. Oh my God.
That brings us to the main card. And the first bout on the main card, Abu Azitar. Yeah, Abu Azitar and Danny Davis Jr. Somehow Davis Jr. getting the main card call up over two dudes that beat him, but whatever. I can't hate. What are your thoughts on this fight, Eddie?
This is an interesting fight for me. You got a guy who's having his first fight inside of the U.S., which is always interesting. A lot of it is the whole weight cutting, and it's just different everywhere else than it is in the United States. But he's going against a veteran in Danny Davis Jr., who it seems to be the World Series of Fighting gatekeeper. Like, if you beat him, you're in, and if not, well, to the bottom of the prelims you go, maybe. But man, Davis Jr. is tough, and he's well-rounded everywhere. He's got really strong hips, good grappling. I feel like he did really good against Abubakar Nurmagomedov. I mean, he had an answer for everything Abubakar threw at him. Although he defended really well, that means he's not offending. So he didn't have any real opportunities to implement his striking game or anything, really. We saw him fight Matthew Frinku. He kind of dropped the first two rounds, but he did come back and finish strong in the third, which I love to see heart in guys like that who their corner will be like, hey, you need to go knock this guy out, and then they go and try and do that. Abu Azitar is a German guy, or he's Moroccan, but he's from Germany, and this dude throws with bad intentions. I mean, he's really explosive, real stocky. We've seen him go 5 rounds, and he just throws those looping punches, almost Fedor-esque, which, leaves him open at times, but if they land, I mean, you're going to feel it. So, I don't know. I like the way he creates angles with those punches. Like, yes, they're looping, but he'll throw one, fake the other, and then come back with the other hand, which I like. It seems to give his opponents issues, and he's got a really good killer instinct, super aggressive. I have seen some weird oddities though with his grappling. I've seen him hit the ground and just do some weird things that I mean, I don't know what was going on there. It didn't look like it's nothing I've ever seen, and not in a good way. So I'm gonna pick Danny Davis Jr. here. I think he's more complete, and I think he will have the gas tank to survive this and outlast Abu Azitar. So I'm gonna go with the upset and pick Danny Davis.
What are your thoughts, Vic? Can Danny Davis Jr. get done against Abu Azitar what he couldn't against Nurmagomedov and Frinku?
No. It's just gonna happen. Now,
that's it. Moving on now.
Yeah. Well, the thing with Danny Davis Jr., and this is just looking at his stint in World Series of Fighting. He came in and he's beaten Phil Dace, Jorge Lopez, and Adam Cella, right? After that, he had those 2 losses, which we talked about, the guys that are fighting ahead of him on this card. And the interesting thing is that his wins in World Series they've all been decisions. He does have a lot of decision wins on his record. He doesn't seem to have much of an ability to put too many guys away with his strikes. He doesn't seem to attempt too many submissions either. So it's one of those things where you go, okay, well, I'm not really sure how what it is exactly that he's going to be able to use to wear this person down and actually win. So it seems like his likeliest path to victory here is going to be some sort of decision. Now, Abu Azitar, despite the fact that he hasn't fought in the U.S., he's been fighting a lot of the names on his record are these regional veterans on the European circuit, mostly Western Europe. And the thing is that he does throw with bad intentions, like Eddie says. It's like everything he throws, he puts everything he's got into it. He sits down and he just launches. There's very little feinting. There's very little jabs and setups and stuff like that. He just goes right out and he starts banging. Now, his ground defense can be serviceable, but it has failed him in the past, and he has looked somewhat lost. But then he's fighting guys that aren't necessarily the most magnificent grapplers either. So it gets to a point where, he doesn't have to defend as well on the ground because he's not dealing with a guy whose offense is that crazy. And not only that, but he's had a tendency to muscle his way out of a lot of things. Like if he's being mounted, he'll start pushing himself up. Like, the rest of my position be damned. Whatever's exposed, well, hell, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. As far as his striking goes and his defensive lapses, I don't know if he's really faced anyone that can be that's had the kind of strength to really put him away standing to the point where he feels like he's in any sort of danger. So it's almost like Justin Gaethje in the sense it's like he's not just walking through it, he just sort of shrugs it off, and he's throwing at a rate where he's got so he's kind of got that going for him. I don't think Danny Davis Jr. is the kind of guy who's going to just shy away from that. And not only that, we also have to take into consideration that on the European circuit, and I'm sorry to say it, but wrestling isn't. It's almost not even the same in some ways as what you see in American wrestling and what's drilled into American fighters in MMA camps. So I gotta wonder if maybe Danny Davis has more of an advantage there. It's going to be a long road because Azitar has pretty good takedown defense from what we've seen, even if he's fighting guys that aren't the best wrestlers. And his physical attributes are probably going to help him out here if the weight cut isn't too harsh. So I'm going to go with Abu Azitar on this one because I just don't, especially at this stage in his career and how some of his performances have been sort of Davis letting the foot off the gas the way he has, I don't really have much confidence in him winning this bout.
All right, well, Vic's on the side of the betting public with this one. Azitar is favored -303 to -315. Danny Davis Jr., the underdog, +235 to +247. So if you are seeing what Eddie is seeing, Danny Davis Jr. at +247 may not be the worst bet for some small change in the world. So those are pretty long odds on a fight between like a relatively unknown product coming off the European scene and a dude that's at least hung tough in World Series of Fighting, well-rounded. But it'll be interesting because as you say, with the guy who doesn't necessarily have a lot of finishing tools, then every fight's going to be like a close grind every time, and it's hard to bet on somebody like that to win. That brings us to next bout on the card, and the first sort of feature name bout on the card of the top three. Vinny Magalhaes versus Jake Hune. Vic, what are your thoughts?
I like this. This is actually it's got the potential to be exciting. First off, Jake Hune was complaining about the lack of media coverage for this event, despite the fact that the other two larger organizations are having a bit of a drought right now. Hey, we're kind of do we count? I don't know, but look,
Probably not, but
probably
we're
not. But,
trying.
hey, we're giving you something. Jake Hune, the American Top Team product, is 9-4 as a professional. He's got 2 submissions and 4 TKOs. And, you know, the opposition that he's faced, it's kind of been a strange road for him because here's a guy who came out as a wrestler with a lot of promise and a lot of expectations. And he's had some decent performances. You know, in the World Series of Fighting so far, he's had 4 fights, so he's 3-1 thus far. His only loss in World Series has been to Clifford Starks, and no one can fault him for that. We're going to get to Starks in a bit. He's got wins against Davin Clark, Ron Fields, and Kendrick Murray. Actually, I'm sorry, Ron Fields was that one fight he took outside of World Series for some reason. And, you know, he's been fighting guys that are mostly in the middle. He's not really winning against guys that are up above a certain level, but he seems to be honing his craft. He seems to be getting there. His cardio looks a lot better. His boxing looks a lot more polished. And his fight IQ is looking okay. Whereas you get a guy like Vinny Magalhaes who's 13-7 with 1 no contest, 11 submissions on his record. I mean, that's really what he comes in to do. You know, you get a guy who's got such just a disgustingly rich jiu-jitsu acumen to come in and for a jiu-jitsu guy to come in and still do well mostly doing jiu-jitsu, that's kind of a rarity now. It's becoming less and less common. So looking at how composed Vinny has been, looking at that M1 fight that he won with that head kick and some of the other, like his standing offense has been looking better and better. His standing defense has not. And I don't know if I don't know what the situation with that may be, but I don't know if it seems to me like he might be able to handle what Hune throws at him. It's what happens when they get to the ground, when inevitably Hune gets him on his back, because it's, you know, and that's not saying anything about Vinny. It's really complimenting the talent that Hune really has, because it's like one of those things that, you know, you're not going to fault him for having that happen. It's just going to happen. The ground battle is going to be interesting. I don't think that Hune has the defensive chops really to stay out of trouble for too long. The worst that we could expect out of this is some kind of crazy decision after they're just hitting each other on the ground. But I certainly would have to favor Magalhaes on this one, probably by some sort of late submission, something crafty.
All right. Do you feel as confident in Vinny as Vic does, Eddie?
I don't know if I feel as confident. I mean, Jake Hune has been steadily improving as far as his Muay Thai goes. I mean, you see it in each fight. He just looks sharper and sharper. And like Vic was saying, his cardio was getting better and better. I don't know. This is a tough one for me. I feel like Jake Hune, he's got a lot of potential. I mean, I still think he's somewhat of a prospect. But he's facing someone who is just world class in a specific area. And when you face a specialist like that, I mean, especially for the first time, like I don't think Hune's ever faced someone of that caliber before. So I think when it hits the mat, it's going to be a bit of a rude awakening for him. Now, like I said, Hune has every possibility to knock Magalhaes out on the feet. I don't think Vinny enjoys getting hit, and I think that's responsible for most of the lapses in his striking defense. It's a lot of him just anticipating so much that he just makes the wrong decision because he's overthinking it. When he fought Matt Hamill in his last fight, I had no idea how he was going to get the fight to the ground. And it turns out he pulled a Nogueira. You know, he got uppercutted and hurt. He shot in on a sloppy takedown, and Matt kind of fell on top of him, and, you know, he locked up the leg lock. So he's like the new Nogueira, I think. That's going to be his path of victory, is to get rocked, go to the ground, and then submit the guy. And I don't see any reason why that's not going to happen in this fight. So I'm going to pick Vinny, and I'm going to pick him by submission. But again, I think he's going to get to the ground probably by getting hurt.
Man, like Vinny has had his moments. You know, he beat Mikhail Zayat and Viktor Nemkov. Legit wins. beat Krzysztof Szynski way back in the day in an exhibition bout on Tough. But we're coming off a win over Matt Hamill here. Like that's the long and short of it for me. So I gotta admit that, like, his last wins: Matt Hamill, Jason Brills, Jorge Gonzalez. But those don't inspire the confidence that, like, against a really good big athlete, Vinny Magalhaes is still going to get it done. You know, like Matt Hamill is just not that dude anymore. We saw,
No.
that he's just not. We remember that Matt Hamill last UFC fight of Matt Hamill's, even if you haven't seen him outside the UFC. If you remember that fight, it was not an awesome display.
No, if you saw his last UFC fight, you're really seeing pretty much every fight since then.
Yeah.
That's kind of how he's been performing as of late.
And Jake Hune, he's one of those dudes that's like he almost kind of, with wrestling instead of kickboxing, but he's a pretty decent kickboxer. He kind of reminds me of like a light heavyweight Pat Barry, where like you see him in these flashes and it's so obvious that there's something really good there, and then it just has the ability to explode into a million pieces at any moment.
Yeah, it's odd. It's definitely odd. It's like, I don't know if it's like a consistency thing or if it's just like in the moment, just shit goes crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I remember watching his fight on Tough. He was on a season of Tough, the heavyweights, or one of the seasons. I don't remember which one. And he fought Todd Monahan, and he was just like beating the crap out of him for most of a round, and then just got armbarred. And it's just like, what do you got going on? And that could easily happen with Magalhaes as well. But I don't know. I'm not trusting Vinny here. I'm not. I'll trust the dynamic exploding guy against the guy who is, I don't know, just so weird. I have no trust for Vinny.
Nor should you. I mean, we saw that Anthony Perosh fight, right?
Yeah.
Come on.
I saw a dude getting cold cocked by the hippo.
14 seconds. Come on.
So, odds on this fight. Vinny Magalhaes, wow. He is minus 320 to minus 308. Jake Hune is plus 240 to plus 252. I am a little surprised that Vinny Magalhaes is getting those kind of odds, to be fair.
I'm not, because he has way more name value. Plus, I mean, 11 sub-victories versus a guy who's all of his losses have come by submission. So.
It's true.
Yeah, and he's fought bigger names. He's got a bit more. Yeah, it makes some sense. I mean, I don't know.
I guess I just kind of view this as a coin flip between two guys who have a real talent for self-destruction.
Well, the odds makers may not have factored that into the equation.
Yeah, because Magalhaes and Hune both are dudes that, like, it just...
They kind of beat themselves.
Yeah. Magalhaes is a dude that can get out kickboxed by Phil Davis. Like, pretty easily and comfortably out kickboxed by Phil Davis. So...
And knocked out by Anthony Perosh.
And knocked out by Anthony Perosh.
Hey, hippos are some of the most violent animals in the animal kingdom, my friend.
You seen that video of the hippo fart? Oh my god. That is the worst thing ever. Go YouTube that when you get some time. It is the most horrific thing ever. These kids are on safari.
I can think of worse. I mean, I live
let's not get into this at all.
No. This is me recommending that we move on.
Yeah, okay. John Fitch, Joao Zeferino, co-main event, welterweight title fight. We are not getting Jake Shields, John Fitch. Eddie, we've already talked about this a little, but give me your thoughts on this fight.
I think it's an interesting fight against two really solid grapplers, which could make for a really boring fight, or maybe a spectacular finish as far as submission goes, perhaps. Zeferino is coming off that 8-man tournament, lightweight tournament, mind you, so he's moving back up to 170. for this fight. He was 0-2 in the UFC. He fought at 185 against Rafael Natal, lost a decision, and then he fought at 170 against Elias Silverio and lost a decision. But I mean, his grappling is pretty damn stellar. In that tournament, he beat Brian Foster and George Patino in 2 minutes and 10 seconds.
It should be noted he kind of got jobbed with that tournament because he had to fight Brian Foster twice, and like, dude, you beat him once already. Like, that's no fair to just have to like go fight. Like, Foster's not a dude you want to fight twice.
He's not a guy you want to fight once.
No.
Anyway. Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand what you're saying, as he kind of got the shaft, so to speak. Yeah. But on the same token, that put him right in a title fight. So, you know, he definitely overperformed in that tournament. No one gave him a shot. Brian Foster, the first time they fought, Foster thought it was a good idea to play footsie with this guy. Almost got his knee ripped apart. Quick, too, 1 minute and 46 seconds. And he instantly released the hold, too. Once Foster was tapping, you know, he let it go, which I like to see. Far cry from the old welterweight champion, who we're not even going to name. Let's not even name him, you know? Let's see, he fought George Patino, and more of the same. I mean, the heel hook is just phenomenal from this guy. 1 minute and 24 seconds. Man, then he fought Brian Foster again, which didn't go so well. I mean, he played footsie for a little bit, but Foster, you know, showed his improved fight IQ from that from their first fight, and just started putting hands on him, landed some brutal ground and pound and put him away. Guys fighting John Fitch, we all know, is not my favorite fighters. He is the Batman of MMA fighters as far as I'm concerned. And he does have an extremely high IQ, I will give him that, and he has looked insanely better on his feet. This is the best I've ever seen John Fitch look standing. He's moving his head, he's jabbing, he's slipping a little bit. I mean, I'm proud of the guy, you know? And he's 38. When did Fitch become 38 years old? Like, that snuck up on me. Like, what? But he's still improving. He's had somewhat of mixed results in the World Series of Fighting. You know, we saw him get choked out by Josh Berkman, which was kind of hard to watch, and then that one former champion knee-barred him. But I don't know. His last fight, he fought Okami. He did really well. He was able to control him. Ultimately got the takedown. He showed a really good pace, real good conditioning. You know, he can go 5 rounds. But, you know, both of his losses in the WSOF are by submission, and he's facing a really good submission guy. So, you know what? I'm going to take the Renzo Gracie jiu-jitsu master here, and Joel Zeferino, and I'm going to pick him by submission.
All right. Vic, what are your thoughts on that? You also going with the Renzo Gracie over there?
Okay. Well, first, this requires a bit of clarification and context. I'm going to start off with John Fitch. Now, he came in a World Series of Fighting, the once unsubmittable grinding wrestling machine, got choked out fairly quickly by Josh Berkman right away. Ended up having an okay fight with Marcelo Alfaya, who ended up on that season of Ultimate Fighter, like Zillion's ATT. Had an okay fight with Dennis Homan, then the knee bar loss to Palhares. Yeah, I mentioned him. Yeah, what? And then eventually, I thought was an okay fight against Yushin Okami. That also went to a decision. So all 3 of his wins in World Series so far have been decision wins. Now we're getting to this point where, and it's important to note here, especially against the Palhares fight, his leg lock defense, he seemed a little lost there with that. And Zeferino isn't a guy who was really known so much for his heel hooks, and at least not in MMA. And it says something about how clever he is that he decided, well, look, if it's going to be an 8-man turn, people don't train very often to defend against, and I'm going to make quick work of what I face. So, you know, he ended up with the 2 heel hook wins. As we mentioned, yeah, sure, he got the shit end of the stick with the fact that he had to fight a guy he already beat, but that's already in the past. I mean, you know, given the fact that all that happened, it is strange that he's getting the title shot, but, you know, they do have a bit of a shallow thing. I don't know if you could call it a division necessarily. It's just more like a ragtag little band of fighters that they've got there at that weight class. So fine. Given that he's the guy that was available, we're not really going to complain based on merit. The thing with Zeferino is that I don't know if he's maybe looking at something that he might have seen in the Polaris fight and thought maybe I can replicate that or go down a similar avenue. Good luck diving for his legs, though. I mean, for Fitch to let that happen, um, you know, Polaris is so smart about how many entries he can use. And a lot of people like to call him a one-trick pony for going for the heel hooks and leg locks. But he's really good at that trick and setting it up. I don't know if Polaris has. I don't know if Zeferino has as many options to get to those leg attacks as well. So I can certainly see him off his back defending a lot. I can see him using a bit more of his the quickness on his feet while he's standing, trying to tag Fitch, a little back and forth going on. I don't think this is going to be as exciting as really, and John Fitch can make anyone look unexciting. But this is going to be a bit of a weird one, and I kind of see John Fitch winning this one by decision again.
All right, the odds on this do agree with Vic. He is Fitch is the favorite, -245 to -235. Joao Zeferino, the underdog, +175 to +185. That probably feels about right for me. I mean, seems like more of a name value thing than definitely. I feel like this makes more sense on name value, just because while Fitch has been submitted, it's been few and far between, and Zeferino is still sort of kind of a relative unknown. Like, he's not somebody that anybody's really paying a lot of attention to, so I'm not surprised to see Fitch favored here.
Also, I think it's worth mentioning that this is a 5-round fight, and I'm not sure how Zeferino's cardio is going to hold up in 5 rounds.
Yeah,
that's a very good point, and it kind of makes me a little sad because I think we haven't mentioned this yet, but the main card for this fight, at least for us here on the East Coast, starts at 11:30 p.m. I don't know why necessarily. The event is taking place from Vegas. There's no other major card scheduled. There's no other major conflict that I can think of, unless there's college basketball. I don't know if that's Sunday or when the hell that is, but yeah, that's a thing that's happening. So you're going to be watching John Fitch at 3 in the morning and then going, oh, there's one more fight.
I also think Zeferino is the better striker. We did see him actually hurt Brian Foster in their second fight, which shocked me.
He's got that Brazilian BJJ guy thing of he's totally fearless on the feet because he's not concerned about getting taken down, so he'll just kind of throw all sorts of crap out there.
Yeah, who's that Bellator fighter? Just lost to Will Brooks.
Marcin Held.
Yeah, Marcin Held. Yeah,
yeah,
just like that guy.
Absolutely.
That same style.
All right, and that brings us to the main event, middleweight title fight. David Branch, Clifford Starks, and who did we end up with? I think
it's Vic's turn.
It's Vic's turn. All right, I got lost somewhere in there.
I get lost too. I'm terrible at keeping count, so don't worry about it.
Vic, tell me about it.
All right, so we have actually two of the most pleasant World Series turnaround stories. Actually, Clifford Starks had a bit of an interesting run in the UFC. He ended up coming in fighting Dustin Jacoby after being on the regionals for a while. Had 2 straight losses against Ed Herman and Yoel Romero, very forgivable losses. Ended up going to Bellator for 2 fights and ended up in World Series of Fighting where he beat Jake Hune, Mike Kyle, and the wrestler Krasimir Mladinov. All of these fights have shown the same thing. There's been a very consistent growth. There's been a very pronounced evolution of his skill set and him sort of expanding, and he still is, to me, one of the smartest fighters out there. I mean, he knows where to keep his range, he knows where not to be, he knows what positions favor him best, when to move and when not to. There's a lot of nuance to some of the things that he does in his game. He's not exactly lighting the world on fire, but he is a pleasant guy to watch. He's not making some of the other dumb mistakes that you see some of these other guys make. So it's fitting that he gets shot, and glad for him in that sense. And on the other hand, you have David Branch, who has shown a lot of growth as well since leaving the UFC, really. He left the UFC, toiled around a little bit on the regionals, and then in Titan, ended up in World Series of Fighting on their very first show. He's had a few, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight wins. especially that really brutal finish that he had on Yushin Okami, that last-minute replacement against Jesse McElligott, who was probably outmatched, ended up with a beautiful submission win. Teddy Holder, he just really made very short work of him as well. And then, of course, there's that Barriofilio fight, which really I'd rather forget because that should not have happened. Now, what's going to happen here is this. Now, Clifford is really seems a lot better at setting up his shots from the outside, whether it's striking or with his wrestling. But Branch has such a sturdy base. He's just so grounded, you know, and he's really good at setting up a lot of power in his shots. They might very well punish him coming in. But then on top of that, you also got to wonder, okay, fine, Starks eventually will at some point take down David Branch. Branch off his back is definitely not a slouch. He's not just a Renzo Gracie black belt. He's really one of those black belts that's been able to adapt his game in jiu-jitsu, adapt it really, really well for MMA, whether it's setting up hand traps, controlling the head. A lot of these things that you don't really you see a lot of jiu-jitsu black belts come into MMA, and you just kind of wonder if all that stuff goes out the window. Like, no, there are some very key elements to the ground game that he really keeps. And he's really good at, once you're on the ground, you're really playing his game after a certain point. And a lot of fighters don't realize that until it's too late. So Starks being that clever, he's going to know what to look out for. From what I understand, he trains with some pretty good jiu-jitsu guys, too. They can probably help point that out. I don't know if that's going to be enough. I don't know if either one of these guys is going to be able to I don't think it's going to end on the ground. I certainly think that one of these guys is going to end up rocking the other guy, hurting each other while standing. And I don't know. I'm actually going to go with David Branch just by the fact that he seems like he's had a bit more growth than Starks. His MMA game seems much more complete. And that includes a lot of clinching, that includes a lot of the kicks and a lot of the other setups that he's got. So I'm going to have to go with that.
All right. Eddie, you agree? You looking at David Branch to retain the title?
Maybe. I think it's interesting that, at least for me, this is the first time I can think of where I'm actually seeing someone who holds a belt in two divisions defending their title in one of those divisions. So I'm kind of interesting how that's going to play out. I mean, I'm not sure what to think of this. I feel like both guys are pretty defensively sound. Clifford Starks is, he plays it safe more than almost anybody in the game. His top game is really safe. We saw that against Mike Kyle. And even on his feet, he's a low-volume striker. He's not going to get into crazy exchanges. Although in his last fight against Krasimir Mladenov, we saw him actually get into a little flurry there at the end, and they nut for like the last 10 seconds, which I've never seen from Starks. So I feel like he is getting more comfortable on his feet, more willing to let his hands go. And I don't know. He's still a little gun-shy at times, but he's definitely improving. And on the other hand, you got David Branch, who is, I think it's safe to say, he's pretty damn good everywhere at this point. Like, he's excellent at jiu-jitsu, and he's damn good everywhere. His striking is developing to where, he's got punches, kicks, knees. It's becoming a complete striking game, whereas Clifford Starks is more on, he's got a nice jab, and he's got a nice right hand, and it's real basic. So I definitely think the striking edge has to go to David Branch here, and I want to say their grappling might even negate each other. So I got to give it to David Branch here. I think, he hasn't lost since 2012, and that was to Anthony Johnson. And I think he's definitely faced better competition. And the more I see him, the less things I can find wrong with his style. So I got to go David Branch here. But it should be interesting. It should be a very technical fight.
Yeah, the story of this fight for me really is that you got two guys who both got into the UFC not as young fighters. They were already in their early 30s when they got to the UFC, but they both got into the UFC really early in their careers, had a couple of losses, and were immediately cut, and then have continued to do all the rest of their normal developing like they would as MMA prospects, and now are like really decent, strong middleweights. And it's kind of a testament to how unfortunate at times the UFC's show me something right now strategy of talent, of going through talent, is. Like, you got a middleweight division that is still struggling to find decent, like, up-and-coming fighters and rising talent, and then you're just chucking guys after a loss or two when you're bringing them in 1 or 2 years into their pro career. And it's kind of like, well, what's the point of bringing in guys that young or guys that inexperienced if you're just going to cut them the moment they start losing? But other than that, yeah, I kind of feel like Branch seems like he's really found the absolute, like, groove of his career right now, and I don't know that Starks has the finishing moxie to kind of put him off that, you know. Is Branch really going to give up a 3-round decision to Clifford Starks?
I think you mean 5.
Or 5-round decision,
Yes.
yeah.
I don't think so. I think Branch has a high enough output with his striking to where he will win rounds, even if it's off of 2 jabs and a cross.
Yeah. On that note, David Branch is the favorite, -245 to -235. Clifford Starks is the underdog, +175 to +185. Any final notes on this before we wrap up the show?
I got one final thing I forgot to mention. In the Abu Azitar versus Danny Davis Jr. fight, Abu Azitar has never weighed in at 170 in his entire fight career. Not one time.
That's a bad sign.
That is a bad sign. So, since Danny Davis Jr. is such an underdog, if you're feeling froggy, that might be something to look into.
I mean, like, what's $5 at +240 or whatever he's at, you know?
Yeah, if you're gonna chip in, don't go too deep on that. That's probably
for sure.
I mean, yeah. Danny Davis Jr. is not somebody that, like,
you'll bet the farm.
In general, a World Series of Fighting card is not the place to be making large bets. No. Just throwing that out there, especially not on underdogs. You do not want to make large underdog bets on a World Series of Fighting card. They tend to be actually pretty good at matching up their favorites to win. So,
yeah, I mean, this is an organization mostly known for its mayhem. I mean, the most fun we've had on any World Series of Fighting card is just the pure, like, oh, wait, that guy's not even fighting tonight. We're bringing in this other dude. Or, so who even knows? It's all the abstract things that shouldn't happen in MMA that somehow end up happening somehow.
That's like the 8-man tournament.
Yeah, like and every bit that was the implosion of that tournament, and it was actually surprisingly fun to a lot of people. So I'm not really, it could be a bad thing, but it actually might end up being something ridiculously fun. Who knows?
All right. On that note, thanks everyone for tuning in. You can find me on Twitter at TheZaneTime. You can find Eddie on Twitter at TheEddieMercado. You can find Vic on Twitter at VicMRodriguez. You can find all 3 of us at Bloody Elbow in our various capacities. Give this video a like. It's a thumbs up. That helps us out a bunch. Subscribe to MMANation.com for all the rest of our Bloody Elbow shows, interviews, analysis, all that good stuff. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next time.